Everyone, I'm Matt, and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. Today is going to be, well, hopefully a special day. We'll see. We have UFO hearings happening in the Senate. So it is the Senate Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities that will be chaired by Senator Kirstin Gillibrand. But first, let's get all of the promo stuff out of the way. Please give us a subscribe if you're on YouTube. Hit that, smash that like button, hit the subscribe button. If you're on Twitter, you can find us at Good Trouble Show. Doing all these things, it helps the sort of algorithm gods promote our content, which of course helps get the message out on this topic and other things we like to talk about. And then also, if we have to pay the bills like everyone else, and if you would like to be a supporter of us for the cost of a Starbucks coffee, you can find us on Patreon, www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show. And speaking of which, I want to give a shout out to our 5 Patreon subscribers that we have so far. So Diego Diaz, thanks for your contribution. Sawan P, Jordan Flowers, Walker, and Deterministic Experiences. Also, our super chats are open. It's a great way to show your financial support by giving us a little tip there. Anyway, this is going to be a lot of fun. So, also, manning our chat room is Uplifting Tweets. I know a lot of you folks know him from Twitter, so he's going to be moderating the chat room. And because I'll want to be paying attention to what's being said in the hearing, I'm not going to really be watching the chat. So we're lucky to have Uplifting doing that for us. So thank you, Uplifting, for doing that. Okay, so with that being said, let's welcome our guests. So on the middle screen there, you have attorney, joining us is attorney Sean Munger. Sean is an attorney practicing law in Massachusetts. And a Suffolk University Law School graduate. Sean has also served as an intelligence analyst with the United States Marine Corps and served with its Warfighting Laboratory and the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit. He can be reached at sean@thedebrief.org. And all the way to the right, we have Daniel Miller. Daniel is an actor based out here in Los Angeles, a lover of all things space and science, which I would say that's pretty much everyone here watching today. And he's also a UAP, loves the UAP topic, and whereas a political junkie, he focuses on the movement and efforts within the U.S. government and scientific community. Guys, thanks for joining us today. This is Oh, I think it's going to be interesting one way or the other. I don't think there's going to be any really big, I don't think ET is going to come walking out in the hearing or anything like that. But I think it's going to be very educational. And yeah, I think it's going to be great. So just to give some folks, because a lot of our viewers are not out of the UFO crowd or track this topic. So just giving you a little bit of background of what we're going to see today. So Senator Gillibrand and quite a few other senators passed legislation that mandated that the Pentagon finally, come clean and start doing the work of investigating this phenomenon. I'm kind of compressing this a bit, and as part of what came out in the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act was the establishment of this office in the Pentagon. Now, in the 2023 NDAA, it was renamed, or it might have been before, the AARO Office, or All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. And this office is essentially supposed to be the nexus for all of these different parts of government reporting their UAP experiences. And so this hearing that is going to be chaired by Senator Kirstin Gillibrand, who has championed this subject, she will be interviewing Dr. Sean KirkPatrick. He will be the witness. He is the director of AARO. But I kind of gave it a sort of top-line explanation here. So this hearing, it starts at 10:30, so here in about 10 minutes. So Sean, maybe just give us a bit of background on what we can expect on this hearing. What you think? What the procedures will be? Just kind of in a nutshell. What do we think's coming up? Oh, hold on a second. Sorry, start it. Sorry, I had you muted there.
Thank you for having me on, and and good morning. So the Senate committees basically have the ability to hold hearings. And there are 4 types of hearings that they could have. There's legislative hearings where they basically review and collect information so that they could draft legislation. And there's also oversight hearings. And from those, they'll review, monitor, and basically help implement the public policy of which the legislation that they drafted before. There's also investigative hearings, and that's where the type of testimony you'll see will be much more adversarial or potentially adversarial. Usually the witnesses will be under oath. And then there's also confirmation hearings. And a confirmation hearing is when the Senate would basically confirm an executive member that was appointed, or a judicial member like the Supreme Court. Now, what we're going to be seeing today is an oversight hearing, which will probably lend to the fact that there's been a lot of discussions that I've seen that, about Dr. KirkPatrick not being under oath. Now, you'd likely see that more in an investigative type of hearing versus oversight. And even in the announcement for this hearing today, they had talked about that they're going to talk about AARO's mission, the activities that AARO is conducting, conduct oversight, as well as speak about the budget that the committee today will be holding.
And the budget, I think, was Senator Gillibrand and 14 other. Actually, no, backing up, Senator Gillibrand in a hearing. I don't remember exactly what it was. I think it was about 2 weeks ago. She asked the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, about why AARO was not properly funded. So that's something that we will get into today, I would expect.
Yeah, I would expect that there'd be some discussions about the budget, especially that it's expressly written in the announcement, and it was in hearings previously. So it would be a potential, focus of if there are items that were listed out as deliverables in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2023 that Dr. KirkPatrick is not starting to deliver on. If he hasn't requested a budget to implement those, then we're trying to fall on who is responsible for maybe these requested deliverables not being presented.
Right. So Daniel, what are your expectations of the hearing today? Do you think it'll be underwhelming or overwhelming?
Well, it probably depends on what your expectations are. I think if you're a UFO fan who is expecting disclosure today, I think you will be sorely disappointed. This hearing is, a step, hopefully, in the right direction. I think this hearing, my personal theory is that it is motivated a lot by the budget, because, as you mentioned, Kirstin Gillibrand was, I think, in 2 separate hearings, but one with Lloyd Austin and then one where I know Moultrie was present, if I remember correctly. Not Moultrie was present. The person they were talking to referred to Moultrie. I think she wants to get to the bottom of why AARO is not getting the funding that it seemingly requested. She mentioned that they requested it. And so I think getting that testimony, both in the classified setting and publicly, will help probably make her case, as well as maybe, as Sean mentioned, why certain things that are in that NDAA maybe have not been addressed yet. So I think for those that are, really into the inside baseball, those who are following closely, I think there will be lots of maybe little details that hopefully add some clarity. I'm really hoping we get some clarity. My biggest hope is that we maybe get a little more clarity on the data that AARO is working with, and whether they're going to focus on the incidents that maybe are easily identifiable,
right,
or the ones that they're able to identify versus the ones that maybe aren't as easily identified. The other half of those cases. I know Representative Carson has mentioned that he is concerned that AARO and those within the DoD are focusing more on the former than the latter, and both are important. But I think you don't want to ignore the unknowns just to look good for your bosses for the knowns. So I just hope we get a little more clarity. Who knows? But I mean, there's not much clarity to be had now, so it wouldn't take too much to maybe get a little more details. The bar is very low.
Yeah. It's well, I mean, I think that the hearing in the House was a bit of a shit show. Ronald Moultrie and I forgot
Bray.
Bray. Yeah, that was. They're like, oh, we don't know anything. But I'm like, yeah,
Right.
you know a lot.
Right. And that's something that Kirkpatrick can't do, right? Because
Right.
he is the head of the office, the interagency office that's dedicated to this topic. So I think it's not going to look as good if he says, oh, I don't know that. Let me look into that, because that shows maybe a level of incompetence that, the public is seeing this person who's getting paid our tax dollars to work on this issue. So if a lot of his answers are, I don't know, first, that's good, that then he should then work on figuring it out. But also, if you say, I don't know enough, then it's like, okay, well, why are you doing this then?
Yeah.
Maybe we should have somebody else.
Yeah, why are you in the chair? Go ahead, Sean.
I would hope that if, as Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick is the only named witness, I would assume or hope that his deputy director, who is also supposed to be an appointed individual, would be at least close by or next to him in order, if he doesn't have the answer off the top of his head, in order to, put the piece of paper in front of him, or, hey, remind him of the correct answer. So if he doesn't have the answer, somebody who's hopefully near or close to him can feed him the answer so that he could be responsive to the senator's request for information.
Yeah. So one thing that many people may not be aware of. So most Senate and House hearings, you'll have the public part, where they talk about the things that are not secret. And if the senator or congressman is asking a question that they cannot answer because it deals with classification or state secret, they'll always say, okay, we'll discuss that in the closed session. And so after the open hearing is done, they'll all scurry off to whatever skiff they're going to, and then that's when they'll ask those questions. This hearing is completely different, which it's apparently not out of the question, but it is very rare. So Senator Gillibrand decided to have the closed hearing first, which should be going on now, unless they forgot to deliver coffee and donuts or something like that. So Sean, what do you think about that? Do you think that's a good sign, bad sign? Any kind of thoughts as to why they may have done the closed hearing before the open, which we're waiting on right now?
I mean, I guess it depends on what they're trying to get out of the hearing. So it would allow the opportunity to ask the question and not waste time of asking a question in the open session that ends up just eating up some of the time that the senator is allowed. But it would also allow the senator to ask the question in the classified setting and potentially ask what specifically about this answer is classified, and give them the opportunity to rework the question to try to elicit a response in the open session. So I guess it would really depend. For me, I guess that's something that I would try to do. If I'm trying to elicit a response from my witness, I want to get at least maybe the response that I know is the answer. And then if instead allow them to get around it by just saying it's classified, I'll just rework the question to allow them to have an unclassified answer that at least, gives an answer that the public is looking for.
I think that makes sense. Daniel, what do you think? Is this a good sign or a bad sign?
Yeah, I think Sean said it well. I think it definitely is a good way to go, in my opinion, because, I mean, the last hearing, if you remember, I forgot who asked the question, but asked about incidents that are undersea, and Moultrie's response was, "Oh, well, we'll talk about that in the closed session." And months later, in the first draft of I think it was the IAA or the NDAA, they said, "Okay, so these aerial and undersea phenomenon, clearly right. The answer was yes, there are incidents undersea, but they didn't answer that." And I think by doing the closed session first, as Sean said, they can find out what will and won't be said in a public setting, and then hopefully be able to adjust their questions in the public setting, hopefully coming forth where they can get as much of an answer as possible, rather than just, let's talk about it later. And Gillibrand has been pretty... Go ahead,
Sean.
I'm sorry. It would also just, I guess, allow the senator in a response to say, that's not what you told me in the closed setting. So it would, again, at least get the information out. But, it's just, it would, well, I guess we'll see how they're going to go with it. But I could see that being a potential reason for the why they had the closed session before the open session.
Another thing that I think will be interesting as well is when they finally cut to the hearing, and right now it's here, I'll put it up. This is all they have up right now. This splash screen. So yeah, coverage begins momentarily. But I think what will be really interesting is when we do finally see a live picture of the room. Excuse me. What the body language is like. Like, does Sean KirkPatrick look like he's in a state of shock because he just went through the gauntlet with Senator Gillibrand calling him on the carpet? Will the senators are they joking around and slapping each other on the back, or are they like really like solemn or like oh this is some serious business, which we all know that it is. That I think that's going to be really that'll be a bit of a tell. And
Right.
excuse me, a bit of frog in my throat. It's already 7:30, and they are not back. So we're just we're still waiting here. So that splash screen is still up. On most of these hearings, these folks have a YouTube channel that allows us to check the feed and all of that, check the sound, but these guys, they only have a website. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that there are no technical issues as the hearing comes up, but I think we'll be good. Anyway, yeah, so I think that's going to be a really interesting thing, is to see what the tone is, and then also as well, the line of questioning, excuse me, which will start with Senator Gillibrand. And does she look happy? Like, is she going to look happy? Like, oh, I got the answers I was looking for? Or is she going to not look too happy because she wasn't pleased with what she got out of the closed session? Anyway, so Sean, what do you think that there's any chance we're going to see any new video or photos or anything that are better than the joke that Moultrie and Bray showed at the Senate, at the House hearing?
I guess that would maybe potentially fall under the activities portion of AARO, of what they discuss. I know that oftentimes when somebody is bringing you before them, you'd want to flash something sexy and cool in front of the people that control your budget or control your oversight. I don't know how many military bases or units, when somebody's coming in to do an inspection, they start, okay, everybody turn on the cool gadgets that are usually stored or tucked away somewhere. So this would be the opportunity for Dr. KirkPatrick to at least show something of a public, hey, we are doing work. We're not just sitting on our hands. We're doing work. We're trying to do what we're to do. I'm doing my job. So this would absolutely be an opportunity for them to do that. How it falls under, how it's elicited, and I guess that could be something that they talk about in the closed session. Is this unclassified? Why are we not going to talk? Can we talk about this in the open session?
Right.
So that would be something that potentially could be worked out in the closed session.
Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I'm probably using this analogy because I am an actor, but this almost to me feels kind of like an audition for the public as well,
Right.
Because at the end of the day, this is a topic that is still quite stigmatized. And I could foresee this becoming you're spending our tax dollars on this, right? So this, in a way, is an opportunity for not just the committee, but for Patrick and the office to say, hey, this is important, and there's a reason we're doing this. And so here are some examples. I think if you just keep mum and don't share any details, obviously within a safe and not a way that they're not obviously going to, share classified information or anything that could affect national security. But there's plenty of room to share something, I think, that shows this is a real issue. This is what we're working on, and we're not just wasting your money. This is going towards real efforts. Whether he actually will share anything, I don't know. I really hope he does, and that it's not just a similar example that maybe Bray had last year. But I think it would be a wasted opportunity, because this is his chance to make the case for this office, right? And how necessary it is.
Yeah, I completely agree with both you gentlemen. One thing to keep in mind is I am quite certain, I would be wildly surprised if in the closed session he has not presented compelling photos or video, which maybe that's why they're running late right now. He's showing them a bunch of stuff. One would hope. The question will be, what would be allowed in the open hearing. Obviously, a big concern of these folks is they don't want to reveal sources and methods. So there are ways to scrub that confidential data, that secret data, out of imagery. Obviously, we're not going to see anything from space or anything like that. But let's say like gun camera footage, which that's easily scrubbable. So anyone that, if they say, oh, we can't reveal it because it's going to reveal classified data, that's a bunch of bull. We saw, for instance, the gun camera footage of the Reaper drone where that Soviet fighter near Ukraine flew over and blew fuel on it and then eventually collided with the drone. And that was, that was probably 4K footage. It was extremely clear. So,
and that was done within like a day.
Yeah, it was like in a day. And I understand as well with the 3 balloons that were shot down. I'm sorry, the 3 objects that were shot down. In addition to the Chinese balloon, no one in Congress on the Senate has seen this footage, which is it's just crazy. Sorry, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but yeah, I do think I'm hopeful that we will see something. But I will say this: so one friend of mine that works in the intelligence community that has seen most of the compelling footage, the classified stuff, he said to me, he goes, if they put that out, it's in many ways it's underwhelming. Anything that you can put out, someone will always say, oh, that's CGI, or Mick West will say it's a seagull, or whatever. But even like if they show some kind of video or whatever, I'm personally skeptical that it will convince a lot of minds. I think that there eventually will need to be some kind of show and tell to convince the public. Hopefully that would come in the way of revealing what crashed goodies that we have. So so Daniel, do you think that there will be any big revelations, or do you think this will be more formal, budget, that sort of thing?
I think likely no, but if there is going to be one, I think it would be the acknowledgement of, because the thing that everyone is dancing around, a lot of people inferring, and even some members coming out of leaders, whether it be, DOD officials or members of the Senate or House, are kind of referring to these incidents where things are showing anomalous flight characteristics that we can't explain or recreate, right? And so I think if there's a revelation that's going to come out, it's going to be talking about those, and maybe, yes, we have multi-sensor data showing this to be the case, because I think one of the biggest questions right now is this just one sensor showing these incidents, and it could be an error, or it's phenomenal. What do they call it in the that little media roundtable? Sensor
anomaly or something like that, or
yeah, like phenomenology. I believe is the word. Jeez. So that's the big question, right? Because if you have multiple sensors showing that, the odds of all of those simultaneously having the same error is pretty slim. And then
Right.
if the answer is then, oh, well, then someone's figured out how to spoof all those sensors, well, that's another really big problem.
Yeah.
So I think if revelation is going to come, it's going to be from the concreteness in which our data shows something that truly is something that is cause for concern, whether
Right.
it be an adversary or something else. It's a problem.
Yeah, Sean, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I want to actually speak to something that you had said a couple minutes ago, talking about when, sources and methods. When I was in the Marine Corps, all of our trigger pullers, everybody that we support, don't have security clearances. And everything I worked in was secret and above, or for the most part, unless it was open source. So we would have to feed them information somehow. So it's doable. And I guess I hope that maybe somebody's watching this, because it's very simple. There's definitely easy steps that you could do. If you collect something with a classified, asset or system, just go on the open market and find a redundant, unclassified one that has coverage over that same area.
Right.
Get that information. So, for instance, if something collects information, or it collects something in the air in a certain geographical area,
Right.
and you know that that's there, go get commercial imagery. It's available all over the place, and there might be happen to be something that caught it. And now you have an unclassified confirmation that you could put out in the public. And all you have to say is, we collected this unclassified systems, and here is this. So you could easily do that with commercial imagery, commercial radar, weather radar, NOAA systems. There's all kinds of things that you could go out and purposely, if you have, information that something exists, something happens, but you could go out and get the unclassified version of that and get it to the public. You can get it to people or feed it to scientists. Say, hey, we can't tell you what we know, but we know this is something. So here you go. Do what you can with it. And it just needs the effort. They just got to know how to do it. So hopefully they start putting somebody that are in these groups, in this organization, that has a background in doing that kind of work. Because if not, many people that grow up in these organizations, they're at agencies their whole life. So they're at, the Starbucks barista has a secret clearance, and then everything's higher. So they're not used to trying to feed stuff to, lower organizations or work with those. So get somebody that at least can think outside the box of, how can I invent this thing, with information that's readily available. It's just going to take a little bit of purchasing power, which AARO potentially could have. Just go out and buy the commercial imagery, go out and buy or task a commercial satellite to take the imagery or take the radar or take whatever's available.
Do you know if, and it's something I'm not really aware of, I know one thing that's been discussed in the past, one of our satellite systems called SBIRS, I'm blanking on what the acronym is, but it basically is a satellite system that can detect several bands of infrared. And what I've heard for a very long time is that these systems that can produce product on the infrared spectrum have seen these vehicles coming in and out of our atmosphere for a very long time. This particular satellite system is primarily used as an early warning satellite to detect nuclear launches. Now, I know that the commercial satellite products have increased in resolution and capabilities, as you just spoke about. Are you aware of any commercial platforms that have infrared detection capabilities that might be able to be tasked to look for these things?
I wouldn't know the specifics. I was not an imagery analyst. However, I worked hand in hand with them. During my time, I don't believe that we sought any of that out. We were just looking basically for imagery on the commercial side. But I would assume that at this point it certainly exists, and there's other type of systems that are commercial that exist. I believe that, again, I could absolutely 100% be wrong. I believe that some of the legislation that covers them might keep their resolution to a certain downgraded.
Right.
They don't want it to get too good. So,
right.
But
excuse me.
I mean, the systems are available. I don't know, but I just wouldn't be.
Got it.
I don't know enough about that specific to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't as well. But yeah, you would think with the proliferation, I can't talk, proliferation of commercial satellite products, and even just like commercial space with, with the rocket, the Amazon rocket, the Jeff Bezos thing that looks like a giant dildo, taking people up into space. So I've often wondered if part of this seeming acceleration in this disclosure effort, if you want to call it that, is due to the increased commercialization of space. Like, you would think at some point these folks, somebody, Elon Musk or whoever, is going to film something that is very definitive or compelling. Daniel, what do you think? Do you think that could have anything to do with why this whole thing seems to be moving along? And by the way, it's 7:45. We still do not have anyone. We still do not have a live hearing feed up. So take that for what it's worth. Anyway, Daniel, go on ahead.
Guess I got lots of questions for KirkPatrick. I think so. I will say this. Yeah, I mean, if there's a there, and there seems to be a there, it's only a matter of time before the commercial technology catches up to the point where it's kind of really hard to not talk about it.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, not just in satellites, but just in, I think, any kind of sensor technology. It's not, I mean, obviously the military has the best and the most in the latest, but, plenty of scientific organizations use technology that for, whether it be weather or, NASA's like doing a study right now trying to figure out what they can utilize that's in the public realm. Yeah, I think that definitely could be perhaps what's motivated some of this is just that there seems to be things going on and it's not really only going to be detectable within the classified world. If,
right.
As years go on and technology improves, we're going to see the same things there.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I highly doubt that this is only detectable in the classified world. Again, like I said, and I think other people have said publicly that if you have the geolocation, time, and date, there is an abundance of sensor data available commercially that could be queried and potentially have some information. It's just sitting there, and they don't know to look at it.
Right.
They don't know to look at this time and date at this specific location. But if you send that out to NOAA's satellite, even if it's a cloud dispersal or something that moves or something, anything, or the overlapping radar systems that we have, or again the commercial imagery, they're taking those pictures. Those birds are in the sky. All you got to do is at least see if it's there. Maybe maybe there's something that's picked up. You have an unclassified picture of something.
Right. Yeah. That's got to be around the corner, I would think. Now, on a totally different topic, we put out a video a couple of days ago, essentially making a direct message to Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. In the previous, it wasn't in the Senate, in the House hearing on UAP, I think everyone pretty much felt that there was a great degree of dancing around the subject and shiny look over here at this really bad video, and everyone I think was pretty disappointed. And part of the point of this video, we know some of the whistleblowers that have come forward to AARO and testified directly to his office, and we were essentially addressing Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, saying, look, that is the data that you should be presenting to Congress. I mean, you can talk about science all day long or this paper we did with Dr. Avi Loeb, but where I was sort of fearful that Sean Kirkpatrick was trying to reset the conversation and the scientific clock back to zero when he has 80 plus years of billions of dollars in government, taxpayer-funded government information that he can build upon. My point in that video, which did very well, I heard a lot of people in D.C. Watched it. Our point was the data that should be presented right now to Congress and to the American people is the whistleblower testimony. It's significant. It's I mean, I don't know the total number of hours, but it's tens of hours of, who knows? But there were a lot of whistleblowers that testified regarding to UFOs interfering with our nuclear weapons or disabling them completely for a period of time. There were people testifying, pilots testifying on their aerial encounters with UAP. And then you had people testifying regarding the crash retrieval programs that this country has run for decades, down to telling them what the name of the sap was and where all this stuff is stashed. Now, so I'm hopeful that we will hear some of the whistleblower, maybe not everything. Obviously, a certain amount of data has to be classified, but hopefully we'll hear something about that. Sean, do you think that that's a possibility, or do you think he'll skirt around it?
I think it would be a possibility to at least, if you want to call, if the senator wants to call them, Dr. KirkPatrick out, because in the National Defense Authorization Act, they were supposed to have prompt sharing of information within 72 hours of learning something. If the congressional committees, by preponderance of evidence, don't receive the information, don't already have the information, then AARO is supposed to tell them. So if the committee or a senator knows that somebody went to AARO, provided them information about a potential SAP or crash retrieval program, within 72 hours, they didn't make the report to the congressional committee, then they would be in violation of what they're ordered to do. So that would be a way to say, we didn't receive this information from you. We received it from them well after 72 hours of you receiving it. So where was the breakdown here? That's because, and then so that would be a way of, for oversight, it could come in.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Just a quick going back here. We're still waiting. It's 7:50, so they're already 20 minutes late. Somebody, Dark, and I, because I'm trying to listen to the conversation and stay engaged, it's difficult for me to watch the chat room, which is why our friend Uplifting Tweets is there. But Dark Spark just commented, "KirkPatrick is being revived." LOL. that could certainly be the case. I mean, I certainly hope not. I'm sure he's okay. Anyway, that I totally. Spin Dub Track says, must be a hell of a closed hearing. Yeah, clearly. And we've had quite a few donations on Super Chats. I can't really scroll back and see who all's donated, but thank you very much for supporting our work here. Anyway, back to whistleblower testimony. So Daniel, what do you think? Do you think we would hear about crash retrieval? Some people would say that, well, that's far too classified to even speak about that. But do you think that well, actually, I have two questions for you. Mm-hmm. Would it surprise you that we've had a crash retrieval program that's been managed by 50 or so people that's been hidden from congressional oversight? And then two, do you think that is something that could be discussed in an open hearing without national security implications?
Sure. I'll answer the first one first. So that's the age-old question, right? There are certainly documents that have been since declassified that point to that being a possibility. And there are people that I respect and trust who say that is the case. That being said, I think that's certainly something that that is something that is such a big story, like that we're talking about the biggest story, arguably, of our species, that I really don't think, and I'm probably, like most people, can't 100% believe that until I see proof or evidence, and I'm sure most people understand that as well. But people who are saying that is the case and that people are coming forward and saying that are not people who, they're serious people and that they're putting their credibility on the line.
Right.
So it leaves me kind of just like, I don't know what's going on. This is crazy. I think people paying attention who are skeptic but curious, it's kind of like, man, this is nuts. I don't really know where this is going to go. So I think it's definitely possible. I think I'll say this, that if it exists, yes, it would be very, very compartmentalized. And my theory is not even within oversight anymore, but probably, over at some contractor with like as little as oversight as possible. And that's a common popular theory as well. So because of that, I will say I don't think that will ever be mentioned, especially not yet, at least in this setting, if it exists, because I think that is a big national security. You're talking about if we pretend that's true for a moment, let's just get rid of all doubt. That's real. That's happening. You're talking about us being in possession of a technology that could be technically, millions of years ahead of us. Who knows? Like, how can you even comprehend what extraterrestrial means or what it represents? Or, or not extraterrestrial, just whatever, other. So whoever can crack that technology through reverse engineering has an advantage that would quite literally change the geopolitical situation. So I can't imagine anyone would ever talk about that willingly because of the national security implication. But that being said, I mean, people are talking, I don't know, like, how can that leak? How long can that stay? Like, why are people coming forward now? There's so many questions that kind of stem from that reality, if that is what's happening. And people who I trust seem to be saying it is. But I will say that I do wonder, as Sean was mentioning, whether Gillibrand might ask Sean Kirkpatrick, have witnesses come forward to talk to you? You know, that's a yes or no question that I don't know if really would harm national security. So, and if he says yes to that, that's interesting, you know. And we know that certain people have, like Robert Salas, but I'm talking more about people referencing programs that are related to UAP that Congress did not know about. And I think it is worth mentioning that there are certain specific types of SAPs where Congress isn't notified. Like, I think they're called waived, unacknowledged special access programs. So that is where the Secretary of Defense signs off on it, even in allowing Congress, even the gang of 8, not necessarily to be notified. So it's a wishy-washy area, but I think in most circumstances, Congress legally does have to be notified. And it is my suspicion that no matter what's going on, the government has been very interested in this topic for a long time. I would be very surprised if they haven't been looking into it, and I bet you they did not tell Congress. So,
Sean, that's fantastic. Sean, do you know if waived special access programs, what the reporting requirements to Congress are on? In other words, is it only the gang? Are they mandated legally to report to the Gang of 8 and no one else? For instance, on Senate Armed Services. How does that work?
Yeah, I would assume that, but I wouldn't be able to speak confidently about that. So I would assume that they would need to have budgetary and oversight through the legislative branch. So I would assume that that's how the chain of events would occur. However, I don't think I'd be able to speak confidently about that. But I mean, I'd like to, if I could, back up Daniel on this, is on the crash retrieval programs. It already does exist because the United States has units that, and this is of course open stories.
Yes.
Have units that recover.
Absolutely.
Recover, Russian aircraft or Chinese or technology. So it already exists. So I don't know. It doesn't matter if it's a crashed Russian satellite or a starship from Zeta Reticuli. If something went down, the United States would have a reason or a desire to go after it, get a hold of it. What it is, who knows? So I guess, that it already exists because we do acquire foreign technology and then we reverse engineer it. So all you'd have to do is you just grab it, and the units that do that are just trying to get it secure and back to somewhere where somebody smarter can get a look at it. You got a bunch of big guys that wear combat boots all the time that need to just go in there and get it and then get it back or get it somewhere safe. So it does exist, per se, but it might not necessarily have to be the next level of some secret organization or some something crazy. It already does exist. If there's new technology somewhere, we have reason to go after it and get it and reverse engineer it. So you're just going to have to add that extra layer on it where if the compartments or the wave programs do exist, they acquire it, you tell everybody, oh, this is a classified aircraft or something. Those people go about doing their thing, and then you stick it in the compartment, and then it's gone. And then it doesn't have to be something really large and I guess conspiratorial. Like the mechanisms exist already. Only thing that we're missing is the waived program or who takes it after it's acquired, because it would be the same as any other foreign tech. You get it, you acquire it. I mean, the CIA went into Russia and took apart a Russian satellite. So these organizations exist. They have the the capability to implement those types of missions. It's already, the stories are out there. And to do that for, terrestrial technologies. You just add, something came down, we don't know what it is. Okay, let's get in there and get it, figure it out later. So that the unit or the organization would go in, grab it, bring it back, and then where'd it go? I don't know. My job is to get it, bring it back, and then hand it off to the next person. And then it's gone forever, or gone, and whoever's looking at it is looking at it. So I would say that absolutely. Even if they've never had a captured craft or materials, the mechanisms exist. So it's already there.
Right. That completely makes sense. And going back, back to what back to a little bit of what Daniel was talking about. So my personal belief is the only way that you're going to convince the public that we are being interacted with by non-human intelligence, it's not going to be Joe Biden getting up on a podium. He could go up there. Literally half the country will not believe anything that he's saying. The White House press office could air a video and say, yeah, this is real. Half the people are not going to believe it, maybe even more. I believe the only thing that will deliver the amount of ontological shock to the public to shake them, to what's going on, is a show and tell. So if we have crashed vehicles, which all of my sources have said, yes, we do, and it's more than one, a show and tell, you could do a show and tell that would not jeopardize national security. And what I mean by that, so just recently, I think it was about 2 or 3 months ago, Northrop Grumman revealed I think it's called the B-21 Raider, which is a long-range nuclear-capable bomber, next-generation stealth. And I watched the reveal. It was actually pretty cool. Lloyd Austin did a speech, and in the background you saw the hangar. And then, ladies and gentlemen, here's our new kick-ass bomber. And then the doors open up, and the thing is silhouetted by a backdrop, and they put a small amount of light on it. But that was the reveal. They said, okay, ta-da, here's our bomber. But they didn't say it does this, it has these types of countermeasures, it's got this type of stealth capability. So there's a way to reveal something like that without giving away the whole, all of your secrets, right? So I think that they could do this in a very similar fashion and not jeopardize national security. And I think that it will only be through a public reveal, a show and tell of what our country possesses, that people will go, oh shit, we need to figure out how we're going to deal with this reality. Daniel, do you think that would be enough would that convince the skeptics, the Mick Wests of the world, and basement boy, I can't blanking on his name, Greenstreet. Do you think that would convince these folks, or are you still going to have folks saying, yeah, this is all a psyop or whatever?
Both. I think it would convince Mick West and Greenstreet, because I will say they are right in the sense that if the government, right, who is the government, but let's just say the government for the sake of argument, is going to share pretty evidence that's pretty hard to refute, I think that would change the conversation pretty quickly, because Greenstreet and Mick West are right in the sense that there's very little in the sense of conclusive evidence of what the heck's going on, publicly at least. But yeah, so I think that would convince them. I think there is always going to be people who are saying this is just a psyop or a shell game, a show of force to freak out our adversaries. And I will say too, pushing back on this what if a bit, the B-21 was revealed only once it was done, and before then there were people talking about it, and people knew it was existing, but there was very hush hush. And I think if we still don't know what this crashed vehicle is, I don't know if we'd ever talk about it, because then what we're saying is we're tipping our hat that we have this thing, but we also haven't figured it out yet.
Right.
So, this is all just big what ifs, but yeah. Sorry, Sean, you were going to say something?
There's also there's a whole other analysis of the legal ramifications of everything that would come out. So let's say something, where's the, I guess, again, the lawyer side is, where's the liability on this? So again, so a national defense contractor has a board that governs it. Now, they have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders. So if all of a sudden they say they roll out this technology that they're reverse engineering, what's that going to do for the bottom dollar of that? Is that going to give somebody else a technological advance that they would have had? Are they now open for lawsuits? Also, how did they acquire that technology? Did they steal it from someone? Did it fall on somebody's land and they're the owner? And I came onto your land, pretended to be an Air Force guy and stole it from you? So like there's
Right.
levels of, lawsuits that could occur that go back decades. So again, yeah, if Roswell happened and that piece of technology, which I guess if you look at property rights, landed on your property and you captured it, are you now the owner of it? So are you the owner of that? And then the Air Force took it from you and then handed it over to somebody else. So do they owe you $1 trillion in technology that was derived from that? Was there a contract between any of the parties? Are they contractually obligated to keep this secret? Are they not allowed to, tell anybody that this existed? So I guess there's a lot of the morality and the legality don't always align, I guess, in our society. Like there's things that are right and wrong, but not necessarily legal. So and they're going to be held accountable for it. So yeah, they might be, a hero towards disclosure, but they're going to, be poor and sit in jail the rest of their life. So it's just not really, or their decision might negatively impact other people that don't really care about disclosure. So I think those analyses should, at least come into play with this. Is if everything's tangled up in a legal mess, then you have to untangle that legal mess, which could also be something that's going on in the background of this.
Well, the other thing that's an interesting thought as well. So the Air Force recovers this technology and tells Farmer Joe, oh, it's a weather balloon. We're just going to pick up the pieces and go on. So the Air Force or whoever has this recovered craft, and they're probably not going to send this out to bid on who's going to reverse engineer it. So they're just going to say, okay, here, Northrop Grumman, you take it. And excluding other potential bidders. I would think that there would be a lot of legal ramifications for that, right?
Right. So all of a sudden, if you have a company that existed at one point and then went under, and a lot of shareholders lost their money, but they were not allowed to openly bid. There's acquisitions as a whole, all the legalities that go around that of what the legal things that you have to do to get contractual work. And if they basically skirted that whole thing, then yeah, there might be legal ramifications. There's probably this thing's if everything we're hearing is true, this is a legal mess. It's a horrible legal mess, and it might not be in people's best interest to bring this out.
Yeah. This is
the rotten fruit.
Yeah, no, for sure. Speaking of mess, there's a scheduling mess. We're 8:10, and we still have not heard from our friends over at the hearing. I keep checking my phone.
Actually, it just went on. It just went on.
Are you serious? Oh, shit.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm hearing it right now.
All right. Let's see. It's not showing up here, so give me a second.
The hearing will come to order. I'd first like to thank our witness, Dr. Sean KirkPatrick, for testifying here and in today's earlier closed session, and for his long and distinguished career, both in the intelligence community and in the Department of Defense. Dr. Kirkpatrick is the director of the Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO. Congress established this office in law to get to the bottom of the very serious problem of unidentified anomalous phenomenon, or UAP. Dr. Kirkpatrick has a very difficult mission. While we have
guys
made
hearing
progress, there remains a stigma attached to these phenomenon. There is a vast and complex
Yeah,
citizen
No, I hear
engagement,
it.
and there's also very challenging scientific and technical hurdles.
sure.
So we appreciate the willingness of Dr. Kirkpatrick to lean in on this issue and the work that he has accomplished thus far. And we look forward to both his opening statement and his
great.
presentation of examples of the work AARO has done. In late 2017, media reports surfaced about activity set in motion by the late long-serving Majority Leader Senator Harry Reid more than a decade ago. We learned that there was strong evidence of advanced technology reflected in the features and performance characteristics of many objects observed by our highly trained service members operating top-of-the-line military equipment. We learned that for the past 8 years, military pilots frequently encountered unknown objects in controlled airspace off both the east and west coasts across the continental United States in test and training areas and ranges. We don't know where they come from, who made them, or how they operate. As former Deputy Secretary of Defense David Norquist observed, had any of these objects had the label "Made in China," there would be an uproar in the government and media. There would be no stone unturned and no effort spared to find out what we were dealing with. We can look at the recent incursion of the unidentified PRC high-altitude balloon as an example. But because of the UFO stigma, the response has been irresponsibly anemic and slow. Congress established AARO. We made it clear that we expect vigorous action. We added very substantial initial funding for the office, but despite our best efforts, the President's budget for fiscal years 23 and 24 requested only enough funding to defray the operating expenses of AARO. It included almost no funds to sustain the critical research and development necessary to support a serious investigation. It took a letter to Secretary Austin from Senator Rubio and me and 14 other senators to get the office temporary relief for the current fiscal year. In this hearing, I intend to probe a series of specific issues. In the recent incidents where multiple objects were shot down over North America, it seemed that Pentagon leadership did not turn to AARO office to play a leading role in advising the combatant commander. We need to know whether this will continue. We need to know whether the leadership in DoD will bring AARO into the decision-making process in a visible way, and we need to know what role AARO will play in interagency coordination after the NSC working group disbands. In the fiscal year 2023 National Defense and Intelligence Authorization Acts, Congress established a direct reporting chain from the AARO Director to the Deputy Secretary of Defense. The role of the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security is limited to providing administrative support. We need to know how this direction is being implemented. UAP are frequently observed flying in extremely high or very low speeds and come in various sizes and shapes. During the recent shootdowns over North America, DoD disclosed that filters on radar systems were adjusted to allow for detection and tracking of diverse sets of objects for the first time. While opening the aperture can overload the real-time analytic process, we cannot keep turning a blind eye to surveillance data that is critical to detecting and tracking UAP. We need to know whether Dr. Kirkpatrick can achieve the necessary control over sensor filters and the storage and access to raw surveillance data to find UAP anomalies. Finally, one of the tasks Congress set for AARO is serving as an open door for witnesses of UAP events or participants in government activities related to UAPs to come forward securely and disclose what they know without fear of retribution for any possible violations of previously signed non-disclosure agreements. Congress mandated that AARO set up a publicly discoverable and accessible process for safe disclosure. While we know that AARO has already conducted a significant number of interviews, many referred by Congress, we need to set up a public process and we need to know where that effort stands. With that, I'd like to turn to Senator Ernst for her opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Kirkpatrick, for your testimony today. I'll keep these remarks very brief so that we have maximum time for your briefing. The recent downing of the Chinese surveillance balloon and 3 other objects underscores the need for domain awareness. Adversaries like China and Russia are working to hold U.S. interests, including our homeland, at risk. That's why your testimony is so important, and I so look forward to a progress update on the establishment of your office. As members know, your office evolved from the Navy-led Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force to the All-Domain Anomalous Resolution Office, known as AARO. Dr. Kirkpatrick, your extensive background in science and technology, research and development, and space makes you well-suited to discuss these emerging challenges. My priority is that we understand the full range of threats posed by our adversaries in all domains. That is what the Joint Force needs to be prepared to fight and win in defense of our nation. This committee needs to know about Chinese or Russian advanced technology programs to exploit our vulnerabilities. And it needs to know whether your office, along with the IC, has detected potential Chinese or Russian capabilities to surveil or attack us. Finally, we need to ensure efficient interagency coordination. Multiple elements of the DoD and IC own a piece of this mission. To add value, AARO's efforts cannot be redundant with others. Thank you again. We look forward to your testimony.
Dr. Kirkpatrick, you can give your testimony.
Thank you, Chairwoman Gillibrand, Ranking Member Ernst, distinguished members of the subcommittee. It's a privilege to be here today to testify on the defense's efforts to address unidentified anomalous phenomena. First, I want to thank Congress for its extensive and continued partnership as the department works to better understand and respond to UAP in an effort to minimize technical and intelligence surprise. Unidentified objects in any domain pose potential risks to safety and security, particularly from military personnel and capabilities. Congress and DoD agree that UAP cannot remain unexamined or unaddressed. We are grateful for sustained congressional engagement on this issue, which paved the way for the DoD's establishment of the Domain Anomaly Resolution Office in July of last year. Though AARO is still a young office, the spotlight on UAP in recent months underscores the importance of its work and the need for UAP to be taken seriously as a matter of national security. All leadership that I've had the pleasure of working with, whether DoD, IC, DOE, civil, scientific, or industrial, view Congress as a critical partner in this endeavor. AARO has accomplished much in the last 9 months since it was established. The AARO team of more than 36 experts is organized around 4 functional areas: operations, scientific research, integrated analysis, and strategic communications. In the 9 months since AARO's establishment, we've taken important steps to involve and improve UAP data collection, standardize the department's UAP internal reporting requirements, and implement a framework for rigorous scientific and intelligence analysis, allowing us to resolve cases in a systematic and prioritized manner. Meanwhile, consistent with legislative direction, AARO is also carefully reviewing and researching the U.S. government's UAP-related historical record. AARO is leading a focused effort to better characterize, understand, and attribute UAP, with priority given to UAP reports by DoD and IC personnel in or near areas of national security importance. DoD fully appreciates the eagerness from many quarters, especially here in Congress and in the American public, to quickly resolve every UAP encountered across the globe, from the distant past through today. It's important to note, however, AARO is the culmination of decades of DoD, intelligence community, and congressionally directed efforts to successfully resolve UAP encountered first and foremost by U.S. military personnel, specifically Navy and Air Force pilots. The law establishing AARO is ambitious, and it will take time to realize the full mission. We cannot answer decades of questions about UAP all at once, but we must begin somewhere. While I assure you that AARO will follow scientific evidence wherever it leads, I ask for your patience as DoD first prioritizes safety and security of our military personnel and installations in all domains. After all, a UAP encountered first by highly capable DoD and IC platforms, featuring the nation's most advanced sensors, are those UAP most likely to be resolved by my office, assuming the data can be collected. If AARO succeeds in first improving the ability of military personnel to quickly and confidently resolve UAP they encounter, I believe that in time we will have greatly advanced the capability of the entire United States government, including its civilian agencies, to resolve UAP. However, it would be naive to believe that the resolution of all UAP can be solely accomplished by the DoD and IC alone. We will need to prioritize collection and leverage authorities for monitoring all domains within the continental United States. AARO's ultimate success will require partnerships with the interagency, industry partners, academia, and the scientific community, as well as the public. AARO is partnering with the services, intelligence community, DOE, as well as civil partners and across the U.S. government to tap into the resources of the interagency. The UAP challenge is more an operational and scientific issue than it is an intelligence issue. As such, we are working with industry, academia, and the scientific community, which bring their own resources, ideas, and expertise to this challenging problem set. Robust collaboration and peer review across a broad range of partners will promote greater objectivity and transparency in the study of UAP. I want to underscore today that only a very small percentage of UAP reports display signatures that could reasonably be described as anomalous. The majority of unidentified objects reported to AARO demonstrate mundane characteristics of balloons, unmanned aerial systems, clutter, natural phenomena, or other readily explainable sources. While a large number of cases in our holdings remain technically unresolved, this is primarily due to a lack of data associated with those cases. Without sufficient data, we are unable to reach defendable conclusions that meet the high scientific standards we set for resolution, and I will not close a case that I cannot defend the conclusions of. I recognize that this answer is unsatisfying to those who in good faith assume that what they see with their eyes, with their cameras, and with their radars is incontrovertible evidence of extraordinary characteristics and performance. Yet time and again, with sufficient scientific quality data, it is fact that UAP often, but not always, resolve into readily explainable sources. Humans are subject to deception and illusions, sensors to unexpected responses and malfunctions, and in some cases, intentional interference. Getting to the handful of cases that pass this level of scrutiny is the mission of AARO. That is not to say that UAP, once resolved, are no longer of national security interest, however. On the contrary, learning that a UAP isn't of exotic origin, but is instead just a quadcopter or a balloon, leads to the question of who is operating that quadcopter and to what purpose. The answers to those questions will inform potential national security or law enforcement responses. AARO is a member of the department's support to the administration's Tiger Team effort to deal with stratospheric objects such as the PRC high-altitude balloon. When previously unknown objects are successfully identified, it is AARO's role to quickly and efficiently hand off such readily explainable objects to the intelligence, law enforcement, or operational safety communities for further analysis and appropriate action. In other words, AARO's mission is to turn UAP into SEP, somebody else's problem. The U.S. government, the DoD and the IC in particular, has tremendous capabilities to deal with those encountered objects. In the wake of the PRC HAB event, the interagency is working to better integrate and share information to address identifiable stratospheric objects, but that is not AARO's lane. Meanwhile, for the few cases in all domains, space, air, and sea, that do demonstrate potentially anomalous characteristics, AARO exists to help the DoD, IC, and interagency resolve those anomalous cases. In doing so, AARO is approaching these cases with the highest level of objectivity and analytic rigor. This includes physically testing and employing modeling and simulation to validate our analyses and underlying theories, then peer reviewing those results within the U.S. government, industry partners, and appropriately cleared academic institutions before reaching any conclusions. I should also state clearly for the record that in our research, AARO has found no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity, off-world technology, or objects that defy the known laws of physics. In the event sufficient scientific data were ever obtained that a UAP encountered can only be explained by extraterrestrial origin, we are committed to working with our interagency partners at NASA to appropriately inform U.S. government's leadership of its findings. For those few cases that have leaked to the public previously and subsequently commented on by the U.S. government, I encourage those who hold alternative theories or views to submit your research to credible peer-reviewed scientific journals. AARO is working very hard to do the same. That is how science works, not by blog or social media. We know that there is tremendous public interest in UAP and a desire for answers from AARO. By its very nature, the UAP challenge has for decades lent itself to mystery, sensationalism, and even conspiracy. For that reason, AARO remains committed to transparency, accountability, and to sharing as much with the American public as we can, consistent with our obligation to protect not only intelligence sources and methods, but U.S. and allied capabilities. However, AARO's work will take time if we are committed to do it right. It means adhering to the scientific method and the highest standards of research integrity. It means being methodical and scrupulous. It means withholding judgment in favor of evidence. It means following the data where it leads, wherever it leads. It means establishing scientific peer-reviewed theoretical underpinnings of observed data, and AARO is committed to all of those standards. I'm proud of AARO's progress over the last 9 months. Much remains to be done, but the hard work is underway. Thank you for your continued support. And before we turn to questions, I'm going to walk you through some of our analytical trends and a couple of cases that we've prepared. So one of the things that AARO does is high integrity analysis, as I've said. This chart represents the trend analysis of all the cases in AARO's holdings, right, to date. What you'll see on the left is a histogram of all of our reported sightings as a function of altitude. So most of our sightings occur in the 15 to 25,000 foot range, and that is ultimately because that's where a lot of our aircraft are. On the far right upper corner, you'll see a breakout of the morphologies of all of the UAP that are reported. Over half, about 52% of what's been reported to us are round orb spheres. The rest of those break out into all kinds of different other shapes. The gray box is essentially there's no data on what its shape is. Either it wasn't reported or the sensor did not collect it. The bottom map is a heat map of all reporting areas across the globe that we have available to us. What you'll notice is that there is a heavy, what we call collection bias, both in altitude and in geographic location. That's where all of our sensors exist. That's where our training ranges are, that's where our operational ranges are, that's where all of our platforms are. In the middle, what we have done is reduce the most typically reported UAP characteristics to these fields, mostly round, mostly 1 to 4 meters, white, silver, translucent, metallic, 10,000 to 30,000 feet, with apparent velocities from stationary to Mach 2. No thermal exhausts usually detected. We get intermittent radar returns, we get intermittent radio returns, and we get intermittent thermal signatures. That's what we're looking for and trying to understand what that is. Next slide. So I'm going to walk you through 2 cases that we've declassified recently. This first one is an MQ-9 in the Middle East, observing that blow up, which is an apparent spherical object via EO sensors. Those are not IR. If you want to go ahead and click that and play it, you'll see it come through the top of the screen. There it goes, and then the camera will slew to follow it. You'll see it pop in and out of the field of view there. This is essentially all of the data we have associated with this event from some years ago. It is going to be virtually impossible to fully identify that just based off of that video. Now, what we can do and what we are doing is keeping that as part of that group of 52% to see what are the similarities, what are the trends across all of these, do we see these in a particular distribution, do they all behave the same or not? As we get more data, we will be able to go back and look at these in a fuller context. How are we going to get more data? We are working with the Joint Staff to issue guidance to all the services and commands that will then establish what are the reporting requirements, the timeliness, and all of the data that is required to be delivered to us and retained from all of the associated sensors. That historically hasn't been the case, and it's been happenstance that data has been collected. Next slide. This particular event, South Asia MQ-9, looking at another MQ-9, and what's highlighted there in that red circle is an object that flies through the screen. Unlike the previous one, this one actually shows some really interesting things that everyone thought was truly anomalous to start with. First of all, it's a high-speed object that's flying in the field of regard of 2 MQ-9s. Second, it appears to have this trail behind it, all right, which at first blush you would think that looks like a propulsion trail. In reality, if you want to play the first slide, we'll show you what that looks like in real time, our first video. So we're looking at that. There it goes. Why don't you play it again and then pause it halfway through? Right there. All right, if you might be able to see that trail there behind it. That's actually not a real trail. That is a sensor artifact. Each one of those little blobs is actually a representation of the object as it's moving through. And later in the video, as the camera slews, that trail actually follows the direction of the camera, not the direction of the object. We pulled these apart frame by frame. We were able to demonstrate that that is essentially a readout overlap of the image. It's a shadow image, right? It's not real. Further, if you later follow this all the way to end, it starts to resolve itself into that blob that's in that picture in the top left, right? And if you squint, it looks like an aircraft because it actually turns out to be an aircraft. Go ahead and put that on. So you'll see the tail sort of pop out there. And so what you're looking at is, this is in the infrared, this is the heat signature off of the engines of a commuter aircraft that happened to be flying in the vicinity of where those 2 MQ-9s were at. Why am I showing you this? So the first one that I showed you, we don't have resolved yet, right? That is an unresolved case we are still studying. This one we can resolve. But this is the kind of data that we have to work with and the type of analysis that we have to do, which can be quite extensive when you have to pull these apart frame by frame. Further, we're now matching all of this with the models of all of those imaging sensors so that I can say, I can recreate this. I can actually show how the sensor is going to respond. All of these sensors don't necessarily respond the way you think they do, especially out in the world and in the field. And I believe that's all I have, and I will open it up for your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kirkpatrick. Can you just give us some raw numbers of how many UAPs you've analyzed, how many have been resolved, and sort of in what buckets, and then how many are still left to be resolved? Just an update from your January public report where it was 366 or something, and about 150 were balloons, and about 24 were drones. You know, just give us an update if you have one.
Sure. So as of this week, we are tracking over a total of 650 cases. Now, the report in January basically said about half of the ones at that time, about 150, were likely balloon-like or something like that. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean they're resolved.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so what? Let me walk everyone through what our analytic process looks like. We have essentially a 5-step process, right? So we get our cases in with all the data. We create a case for that event. My team does a preliminary scrub of all of those cases as they come in, just to sort out, do we have any information that says this is in one of those likely categories? It's likely a balloon, it's likely a bird, it's likely some other object. Or we don't know. Then we prioritize those based off of where they are. Are they attached to a national security area? Does it show some anomalous phenomenology that is of interest? If it's just a spherical thing that's floating around with the wind and it has no payload on it, That's going to be less important than something that has a payload on it, which will be less important than something that's maneuvering, right? So there's sort of a hierarchy of just binning the priorities because we can't do all of them at once. Once we do that and we prioritize them, when we take that package of data in that case, and I have set up 2 teams, think of this as a red team, blue team, or a competitive analysis. I have an intelligence community team made up of intelligence analysts, and I have an S&T team made up of scientists and engineers and the people that actually build a lot of these sensors, or physicists, because if you're a physicist, you can do anything, right? But they're not associated with the intel community. They're not intel officers. So they look at this through the lens of the sensor, of what the data says. We give that package to both teams. The intelligence community is going to look at it through the lens of the intelligence record and what they assess, and their intel tradecraft, which they have very specific rules and regulations on how they do that. Scientific community, technical community is going to look at it through the lens of what is the data telling me? What is the sensor doing? What would I expect a sensor response to be? And back that out. Those 2 groups give us their answers. We then adjudicate. If they agree, then I am more likely to close that case if they agree on what it is. If they disagree, we will have an adjudication. We'll bring them together, we'll take a look at the differences, we'll adjudicate why do you say one thing and you say another. We will then come to a case recommendation. That'll get written up by my team. That then goes to a senior technical advisory group, which is outside of all of those people, made up of senior technical folks and intel analysts and operators from retired out of the community. And they essentially peer review what that case recommendation is. They write their recommendations, that comes back to me, I review it, we make a determination, and I'll sign off one way or the other, and then that will go out as the case determination. Once we have an approved web portal to hang the unclassified stuff, we will downgrade and declassify things and put it out there. In the meantime, we're putting a lot of these on our classified web portal, where we can then collaborate with the rest of the community so they can see what's going on. That's, in a nutshell, that is the process, right? So because of that, that takes time. So of those over 650, we've prioritized about half of them to be of anomalous, interesting value. And now we have to go through those and go, how much do I have actual data for? Because if all I have is a operator report that says I saw X, Y, or Z, my assessment is A, B, or C, that's not really sufficient. That's a good place to start, but I have to have data. I have to have radar data, I have to have EO data, I have to have thermal data, I have to have overhead data, and we need to look at all that. Now, from a big picture perspective, I still have, that's all still very valuable data, and we're looking at applying a lot of things, new tools, analytic tools like natural language processing, so I can go across all of those reports and look for commonalities. How many of them are being described as round spherical objects that are maneuvering? How many of them are not maneuvering? How many of them seem to have a plume to it or note? That's also going to be very valuable to give us more of a global picture and a trends analysis of what are we seeing, right? And help us get to the determination. So go back to your question, ma'am. We have this next quarterly report will be coming out here pretty soon. Our next annual report, you all have given us, moved it up to June, July. We're going to be having that done about that time frame, and we will have we'll be combining a whole number of reports into that one. I think we're currently sitting at around if I remember correctly, we're around 20 to 30-ish are about halfway through that analytic process. A handful of them have made it all the way out to the other side, gone through peer review. We've got case closure reports done and signed. We're going to get faster as we get more people on board and we get more of the community tools to automate some of the analysis that has to be done.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And Dr. Kirkpatrick, the ODNI annual threat assessment states that China's space activities are designed to erode U.S. influence across military, technological, economic, and diplomatic spheres. Likewise, Russia will remain a key space competitor. In the course of your work, have you become aware of any Chinese or Russia technical advancements to surveil or attack U.S. interests?
So that's a great question. Part of what we have to do as we go through these, especially the ones that show signatures of advanced technical capabilities, is determine if there's a foreign nexus. Mm-hmm. That's really hard if what we observe doesn't have a Chinese or Russian flag on the side of it. Now, I think it is prudent to say of the cases that are showing some sort of advanced technical signature, of which we're talking single percentages of the entire population of cases we have. I am concerned about what that nexus is, and I have indicators that some are related to foreign capabilities. We have to investigate that with our IC partners, and as we get evidence to support that, that gets then handed off to the appropriate IC agency to investigate. Again, it becomes an SEP at that point.
Yeah, somebody else's problem.
Right.
Very good. Thank you. Yes. Is it possible that the Chinese or Russian advanced technologies could be causing some of these anomalous behaviors? And you said there seems to be some indicators. So, just for us today, could you describe potential threat that might exist out there if they are foreign nexus?
In order to do this research appropriately, we have to also be cognizant of what is the state of the art in development across the S&T community. What are the DARPAs of the world doing? What's the horizon scanning of emerging technologies appropriate to this subcommittee? What is happening out there? And if somebody could accelerate that capability, how would that manifest itself and what would it look like? And do those signatures match what we're seeing? Mm-hmm. There are emerging capabilities out there that in many instances, Russia and China, well, China in particular, are on par or ahead of us in some areas. Right. So previously, I used to be the Defense Department's intelligence officer for science and technical intelligence. That was our job, was to look for what does all that look like. And then, my last several years, of course, in Space Command doing space. The adversary is not waiting. They are advancing, and they're advancing quickly. If I were to put on some of my old hats, I would tell you they are less risk-averse at technical advancement than we are. Right? They are just willing to try things and see if it works. Are there capabilities that could be employed against us in both an ISR and a weapons fashion? Absolutely. Do I have evidence that they're doing it in these cases? No, but I have concerning indicators.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that is why it's so important that you are working with the intelligence community as well, because you have the science, the data background, but you also need to know from various sources what adversaries may be working on. Is that correct? Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Rhodes.
Well, thank you, Chair Gillibrand, Ranking Member Ernst. This is a really important hearing. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Kirkpatrick, for your service to the country, and as a former systems analyst myself, I really appreciate your flow chart, the description of the process, and particularly the trends analysis going forward, how that's going to help us. And you talked about language, the large LLMs, the large language models, artificial intelligence. That's really going to help us in the hunt forward. Predictive analysis, I think, to some of your point, what we're worried about. But I want to focus on Nevada because I want to talk about the impact of UAPs on aviation safety. So when it comes to unidentified aerial phenomena, one of my first concerns is really about the safety of Nevada's military aviator. So we have airmen stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, naval aviators flying at Naval Air Station Fallon, and service members from across the world training at the Nevada Test and Training Range. I know you know all this. And unfortunately, the existence of advanced UAPs in the U.S. airspace and over U.S. military installations, not a new phenomenon. The Navy's officially acknowledged that between 2004 and 2021, 11 near misses occurred involving UAPs that required pilot action and follow-up reports. As a result, in 2019, the Navy established a protocol for pilots to report on their dangerous encounters. So could you speak to any ongoing efforts within DoD to ensure the safety of our aviators with a potential UAP encounter, and what's your relationship with Northcom, NORAD, Spacecom when it comes to this immediate real-time response, and how they're right there in the moment, right?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So let me start with, my relationship with the commands are very good. I just came back from sitting down with General Van Herk and all the J staff out at Northcom a couple weeks ago, talking through exactly what we need to do to help them get their arms around this. We are also working very closely with Joint Staff, and the Joint Staff has just been very outstanding in helping work through policy and guidance issues to the forces and to the services. And I would like to just make sure that we message back to all of the operators the importance of their reporting, and the fact that you're about to get a bunch of new requirements that we're issuing through the Joint Staff on all of the data that we're going to need you to save and report back to us. It is invaluable, and we are working to try to take the most advantage of that to learn what it is that we're trying to mitigate. To get directly to your question, first thing that we're doing is normalizing our reporting, right? We're standardizing our reporting and the requirements associated with that. Guidance from the Joint Staff, I think, goes out maybe this week, maybe next week, that we've been working with them for some months that does exactly what I just said. It gives them timelines, it gives them requirements, it gives them, here's all the data you have to have, and you got to retain it. The next thing that comes after that is a plan ord that will go out to the commands for mitigation and response. So there's a couple of things that we have to do. One, I need to work with the commands and with the IC and with our outside of our DoD and IC partners to extend our collection posture targeted at some of these key areas that you saw on that heat map. That have a lot of activity, so that we can turn on extra collection when an operator sees something. So part of this is generating as a response function, in what we call a tactic, technique, and procedure for an operator. When he sees something, calls back to the operations floor, they can turn on additional collection. What does that collection look like? How do I bring all that together so I can get more data on what is that thing?
Can I ask really quickly,
Sure.
do you have the authorities you need to extend your collection posture between agencies or branches of the military? Because that seems to me to maybe be a sticking point. I know my time's just about up. I'd love to follow up about your risk management methodologies for some of these, but do you need any authorities that you don't have to get get the data?
There are
we
some
need?
authorities that we need. We currently are operating under Title X authorities, but we have, good relationships across the other agencies, but having additional authorities for collection, tasking, counterintelligence.
That's something-
Those are all things that would be helpful, yes.
Thank you.
To follow up, Dr. Kirkpatrick, will you help us write that language so we can put it in the defense bill this year so that we know what authorities you need?
We can do that.
Thank you. We're going to start second round, so if you want to stay, you can ask another round. I have at least 3 more questions, so. Do you want to go right now, so you, in case you have to leave? Oh, I could, I do. Yeah, go ahead.
If you would do that, that would be great. I'm going to stay on the drones issue because obviously we also have Creech Air Force Base. We talked about those Reapers. But last February, the Chinese spy balloon, it did cross through the U.S. airspace, shot down by a Sidewinder missile fired from an F-22. Sidewinders cost us close to $500,000 each. So, given the cost of these missiles, the cost per flight, all of these other things, like I said, follow up on the authorities, your methodologies, the data collection, they can help us in other ways. But how do you think we can develop a sustainable, affordable response to UAPs where we need to, that will definitely violate our airspace, not may, definitely violate our airspace every chance that they can get because they're our adversaries. They want this information. So what do you think some cost-effective measures might be that we can get what we need out of that or take them down, whatever's appropriate, whatever the appropriate measure is, let's put it that
So
way.
that is actually wrapped into the plan org that we're working with Joint Staff to send out. What do the commands need from both a capabilities perspective for kinetic and non-kinetic engagements? What are the response functions of the particular wings or Navy, what have you? And then what authorities do they need?
Right.
So one of the challenges that we've seen is there's an authorities issues with the owners, operators of those ranges that they need to work through, and we're working that with Joint Staff and OSD. So big picture, we need to do all that. If you want to get down to the specifics there are non-kinetic options to engage pretty much everything, right? Whether it's electronic warfare, whether it's laser technology.
That's where this data,
That's
having
right.
the good data collection, predictive
Correct.
analytics, you can
Inform.
make some assumptions on possibilities.
That's right. And we will inform recommendations back to the department on here's what could work, here's what we've seen work, here's what doesn't work.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to talk a little bit about your logistics, who you report to, how that's going, whether you need different reporting lines. By congressional legislation, your office is administratively located with the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, but you're not substantively subordinate to the Undersecretary. Rather, you are a direct report to the Deputy Secretary. Are you taking direction directly from the Deputy Secretary? Are you able to meet and brief the Deputy Secretary? Is the Office of USD INS working with you to have the right framework?
So USD INS, I currently report to USD INS until they come up with the plan for how they're going to implement legislation. DOD and DNI are working through that now. I'd have to refer you back to USD INS on what their plan is.
Do I need to update your reporting structure in the next defense bill, or is this something that you think will work its way out, or does it need further clarity?
I think they're planning on coming back to you with an answer on what that plan is, and I think at that time that will inform what you want to do.
Okay, thank you. As you know, Dr. Kirkpatrick, Congress has mandated that your office establish a discoverable and accessible electronic method for potential witnesses of UAP incidents and potential participants in government UAP-related activities to contact your office and tell their stories. Congress also set up a process whereby people subject to non-disclosure agreements, preventing them from disclosing what they may have witnessed or participated in, could tell you what they know without risk of retribution from or violation of their NDAs. Have you submitted a public-facing website product for approval to your superiors, and how long has it been under review?
I have. We submitted the first version of that before Christmas.
And do you have an estimate from them when they will respond and when you'll have feedback on that?
No, I don't.
Okay. We will author a letter asking for that timely response to your superiors. When do you expect that you will establish a public-facing, discoverable, and access portal for people to use to contact your office as the law requires?
So I would like to first say thank you all very much for referring the witnesses that you have thus far to us. I appreciate that. We've brought in nearly 24 so far. It's been very helpful. I'd ask that you continue to do that until we have an approved plan. Mm-hmm. We have a multi-phased approach for doing that we've been socializing and have submitted for approval sometime. Mm-hmm. Once that happens, then we should be able to push all that out and get this a little more automated.
Great.
What I would ask, though, is as you all continue to refer to us and refer witnesses to us, I'd appreciate if you do that. Please try to prioritize the ones that you want to do, because we do have a small research staff dealing with that.
Thank you. And then do you have any plans for public engagement that you want to share now that you think it's important that the public knows what the plan is?
So we have a number of public engagement recommendations according to our strategic plan. All of those have been submitted for approval. They have to be approved by USDINS. We are waiting for approval to go do that.
Okay, I will follow up on that. And then my last question is about the integration of departments' UAP operations, research analysis, and strategic communications. During the recent UAP incidents over North America, it didn't appear that you were allowed to play that role. Do you agree that the public perception is generally that you and your office did not appear to play a major role in the department's response to the detection of objects over North America? What can you tell us that's going on behind the scenes from your perspective? And in the after-action assessment process, is there awareness that there is a need to operate differently in the future and a commitment to doing so?
When the objects were first detected, I got called by Joint Staff Leadership to come in late one night to review events as they were unfolding and to give them an assessment based on what we knew at that time. I did that, worked with the Director of Joint Staff, the J2 and the J3 that night and over the couple of following days on what are the types of things that we are tracking from an unidentified object perspective, what databases do we use, those sorts of things for known objects, known tracking. Beyond that, the response, I would have to refer you back to the White House for the decision on how they did the response. We did not play a role in what you would respond, other than that initial, advice on what we are seeing and how we are seeing it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Kirkpatrick, I know that your office has gotten a lot of attention recently, and of course, any new agency, there tends to be a push to increase size and funding. We want to make sure that you're able to meet your goals, but what I also need to ensure is that we're not duplicating or replicating existing functions and creating redundancy within DoD and the interagency. So what steps are you taking right now to make sure that your particular office and function is unique to any of the other agencies that might be involved in these types of cases?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would like to lay down, here's what am I, sort of my mission and my goal and my vision here. So the vision is at some point in the future, you should not need an AARO. If I'm successful in what I'm doing, we should be able to normalize everything that we're doing into existing processes, functions, agencies, and organizations, and make that part of their mission and their role. Right now, the niche that we form is really going after the unknowns. I think you articulated it early on, this is a hunt mission for what might somebody be doing in our backyard that we don't know about. All right, well, that is what we are doing, right? But at some point, we should be able to normalize that. That's why it's so important, the work we're doing with Joint Staff, to normalize that into DoD policy and guidance. We are bringing in all of our interagency partners. So NASA is providing a liaison for us. I have FBI liaison, I have OSI liaison, I have service liaisons. Half of my staff come from the IC, half of my staff come from other scientific and technical backgrounds. I have DOE, and so what we're trying to do is ensure, again, as I make UAP into SEP, they get handed off to the people that is their mission to go do, so that we aren't duplicating that. I'm not going to go chase the Chinese high-altitude balloon, for example. That's not my job. It's not an unknown, and it's not anomalous anymore. Now it goes over to them. Right.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I wanted just to follow up on the filters for surveillance. Outside observers have speculated that DoD sets filters on certain sensors to eliminate objects that are moving really fast or slow, because what we are looking for militarily are conventional aircraft and missiles. UAP that doesn't fit into these programs would thereby be weeded out and never noticed. This speculation was proven to be true during the UAP incidents over North America, where DoD publicly acknowledged that we were able to start seeing these UAPs only when we opened up these filters. Obviously, our military operators cannot be overloaded with objects that are not conventional aircraft or missiles. Can you nonetheless make sure that the raw data is being captured and subsequently processed, so that your office knows what's really out there? And is that going to cost money? Will you expect to pay for that money out of AARO's budget?
One of the key tenets that we're trying to do in our science plan is understand what those signatures are. So we get all the raw, for example, radar data prior to the scrubbing and filtering to allow it to enter into our weapon systems and our detection systems. We are now taking all that data and cross-correlating it to what pilots are saying they're seeing or other observations from other operators. What that allows us to do is then see if there are any signatures in that data that I can pull out, generate what we'll call automatic target recognition algorithms that allow us to then use that signature associated with a observed UAP, whatever that UAP may be. We will then make those recommendations of what those changes should be back to the department. So the Deputy Secretary had asked me last October to make those recommendations. What changes do we need to make to radars, to platforms, to detection systems and algorithms to pull on those algorithms and make those changes? That's going to take some time. That's where the research and development comes in, right? It's not instantaneous. Right now, a lot of the, I won't say, a lot of the things that fall outside of the ranges of those filters have been identified by people in the loop, and you can't have people in the loop all the time. It's just not cost effective. So part of our budget is working through what does that look like, and then making those recommendations back to the big program offices for them to put into changes in acquisition.
My last question is about the academic community. Can you give us an update on sort of how you collaborate with the academic community, and whether how the independent study being done by NASA complements AARO's work?
Sure. Two questions, so I'm going to try to make it quick. In 1979, Carl Sagan said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I would go one step further, and I would say extraordinary claims require not only extraordinary evidence, but extraordinary science. And so how do you do that? You do that with the scientific method, right? And so as AARO is developing and implementing its science plan, it has to do so grounded in a solid foundation of scientific theory across the entire range of hypotheses that have been presented for what UAP are. That range spans adversary breakthrough technology on one hand, known objects and phenomena in the middle, all the way to the extreme theories of extraterrestrials. All of that has physics-based signatures associated with it, whether it's theoretical from the academic community, known from things like hypersonic weapons, or adversary breakthrough technologies, as we've talked about before, or the known objects that we have to go measure. The idea is across that entire range, you have to come up with peer-reviewed scientific basis for all of it. The academic community plays a very big role on the one end of the spectrum, the intelligence community on the other end of the spectrum, and then measurement in the middle. Once I have those signatures identified in validated, peer-reviewed documents, then I have something to point to for all that data. Because all that data is going to match one of those signatures, right? And then I can go, well, it's that and not that, or it's that. And that helps us go through all that. Where NASA comes in and the study that they're doing, which I'm supporting, is really looking at the unclassified data sources that might be used to augment our classified data sources to understand if there's a signature there we can pull on. So very similar to the radars, but civil capabilities. So for example, we have a lot of climate science satellites, for example, that look at Earth. Lots of them. How many of those is the data valuable in seeing these kinds of objects? The challenge in that is those platforms don't necessarily have the resolution you need. So if you remember the slide I put up there with the trends, the size of the objects we're looking for are typically reported to be 1 to 4 meters. Well, the resolution of many of the climate science civil satellites is much larger than that, which means you'd have a hard time picking out something that's smaller than a pixel on the imagery on the data. That's not to say all of it's not useful, and there are ways of pulling through that data and going through. That is what NASA is focused on right now. So what are some other data sources that could be used? In addition, things like open source and crowdsourcing of data. We're exploring public-private partnerships, ma'am, as you know, we've talked about in the past, to look at, is there a way to smartly crowdsource additional data that might be useful to augment some of my classified sources? And what does that look like? And how would we do it so that we're not overwhelmed by, everybody who wants to take a picture of everything?
Is there anything else you'd like to tell the committee before we close? Or do you have another round? Yeah. Do you have anything else you'd like to tell the committee before we close?
Thank you very much for allowing us to come and share a little bit of insight into what AARO is up to and what we're doing. I hope to be able to share a whole lot more in the future. We have a lot of work to do, so if you don't hear from me outside, it's because we've got a lot of work to do.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. KirkPatrick. Thank you for the hearing.
Thank you.
Wow. Hold on 1 second here. It's making a little adjustment in the audio. Okay. Well, let's see. That was our Senate hearing. That was on giving testimony there. That was Dr. Sean Quadcopter. He holds a doctorate in balloons from Siegel University in Swamp Gas, Ohio. All I can say is what a load of shit that was. So Yeah. So, firstly, and I've been getting some text messages. Sean, what's your take on what we just witnessed? Oop, not hearing you. Hold on one second. Let's see, Daniel, can you say something?
Testing 1, 2.
There we go. Okay,
testing.
yeah. So, Sean, I'm not hearing you. So check your mic, please. So we'll start with you, Daniel. What did you think about that?
Sure. And yeah, Sean, I still don't hear you. Just so you know. Well, there we go. I'll be quick. I'll say this my perspective comes from more of a academic background and a scientific background, and wanting the work on this topic to come from that perspective in order to further the conversation in a more mainstream way. I want academia involved in this. I think academia should be involved in this. I don't want this topic relegated to just the classified world, because it doesn't really further transparency. And I will say that what he said in terms of the methodology is sound. I liked what I heard in that regard. I think having separate teams, working on the same cases, and which is then sent to him, which is then sent to another group, that, this is peer review. This is the process in which I am glad to see these incidents being evaluated in that manner, because I think it is important that whatever results that might come, they are defendable. Because if further down the line the one thing I'll get to too is that I do wish they spoke more about that single percentage of cases that were quite anomalous, because that does track with the data over the decades, right? It's always about what is 5% of cases, and the question, and like back in Project Blue Book days, where there were the percentage of cases where they had a lot of data, but still were highly anomalous, right? Like that number keeps coming up, and that's what I'm most interested in. If they apply that analysis to these cases, those answers are more defendable, because they are not just a ride by 3 people who think that. It's gone through more of a rigorous scientific approach. So in that aspect, I'm happy to see that the process in which they're analyzing cases, it would hold up to, I think, scientific scrutiny better. But yeah, my one really big hope was more elaboration upon those more anomalous cases. And they hinted at a little bit, but I really do feel we got a little more clarity on that end, but not as much as I personally would have liked. But I was pleasantly surprised.
Sean?
Yeah, I would agree. I did like that the way he presented it. Some of the words that he said as well definitely aligned with the intelligence community, which means to me that he's doing his work, and he's building. I mean, it cannot be easy to stand up a brand new office. So I guess I'd have to give him some points on that. Not just that, though. He was wearing the same tie class as me, though. So I think he got
the most important.
He got some points on that as well. But yes, the methodology is good, and the fact that he is keeping the two organizations, the intelligence and the scientific side, separate from each other, I thoroughly like it, just because each has it has a similar approach, but extremely different, and that each would then give their own evaluation, and then they would sit down. If they agree, you can cancel it out. I like that he's bringing technology in again, but this is also in theory, okay, right? So in practicum, things might not necessarily be the same. So yeah, the car can work, amazing on the road and break down on the track or whatever it is. So I guess it does seem that he's, doing what needs to be done. The 1%, I guess, would probably, bring people up in arms in the community. But I guess if you go to any police department in any town, they get 1 million gunshot calls, and 99.999% of them are fireworks. So they're just, so you got to filter out all of those things that are not necessarily anomalous. And you only need one. All you need is one.
Right.
So again, I guess we didn't really come to any of the the crash retrieval talk that's very popular in the community right now, and the things that we're hearing. But it does, I guess I would say that Gillibrand had brought up, Kirkpatrick had brought up, thank you for bringing witnesses to us, and please prioritize those. So he may have been talking to that aspect, and then they might not have been able to track down those things. Also, I think he did touch on in the end there when he was talking about NASA is pulling the available commercial data that's out there. That NASA is going to be doing that, which is we had talked about that before this. There's an abundance of information that's out there that if you could, you basically have some unclassified information that could go out to the public. And then talking about the scientific method, he is an academic himself, so that's his own language, that's his own biases, and the only way that he's only going to be able to speak on any subject. So those are the elements that I did gather from this, and I know a lot of people are probably going to be not happy about what just happened there, and understandable. But I guess if you're gonna ask a doctor to talk to you, they're going to talk to you in doctor language. So it's not really.
That's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, no,
right,
for sure. So while this was going on, I was receiving texts from someone that works in the intelligence community, someone that has worked this particular portfolio, and I have to say, I'll just kind of read some of the messages that came from him and some other folks in that area. One of the things that he noted right off the bat was a complete disregard of human intelligence, which I think that's, we'll get into that. I think that's mainly on the crash retrieval side. And when he was talking about not showing anything advanced as far as data, he pointed out this. Intelligence official pointed out, easy to scrub sensor feed and show us the display of advanced tech. He noted, if this tasking were given to a private company, they would have been so much more further along on meeting mission requirements. He seems to be setting himself up for a lifetime job with basically saying we need more time and money and power. And another really interesting point, him saying, I report to USDINS, which is the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, and as well as Ando and other folks have stated many times, this has been the organization that is engaged in administrative terrorism, harassing people that have come forth about UAPs, trying to jeopardize their security clearance, other sort of harassment. And
the new legislation changed that, and it seems to have not changed yet.
It has not changed. It's supposed to have changed. It has not changed from the folks that I have spoken with that have continued to receive this harassment. Yes, and this is some good points too. And again, maybe it's the scientist thing, but I thought he had a couple of dick statements in there. Please prioritize who you send forward. Basically just saying, telling Congress, don't tell me what what I should do. And it was interesting too. Another point that was brought up. He indicates he only wants certain evidence and data and doesn't want resources used on others. And I think that would be the case with human intelligence. And one person said, "F off with peer review. That doesn't matter considering we've been lied to for 80 years." And another person in the intel community, "I never want to hear peer review again. We just spent 80 years being lied to by multiple organizations. Peer review means nothing anymore." And then last couple of, the one thing he did say towards the end, he goes, if I don't tell you what I'm doing, it's because I'm busy. I mean, seriously, you're going to tell sitting senators that? And one interesting point, too, that this intel official noted, the video that was shown of the orb, that was not the Mosul orb video. This was taken more recently, yet they both appear to show the same object. And then one statement that somebody noted in the chat that I didn't catch, I guess at some point he said something about, quote, extreme theories of extraterrestrials, which I don't know if you guys caught that.
Yeah, he was like talking about a spectrum, like from this thing to the extreme end, which is extraterrestrials.
Got it. Yeah, so I wasn't quite sure if that was meant in a disparaging remark. One whistleblower that I did have a private conversation with that was from the DOD, he testified for quite a number of hours to a lieutenant colonel in AARO. And one thing that he did mention was that he felt, and he didn't elaborate why, but that KirkPatrick does not believe in the extraterrestrial theory. Now, it just comes from one individual. That was his impression. I didn't ask him to elaborate on it. Anyway, those were just kind of some things that I was getting messages on. I do agree, Daniel, absolutely, and Sean as well. There has to be a scientific approach to this, but I think, there was a good opportunity to talk about the whistleblowers that have been testifying, even if he were to just generally describe some of the reports that he has received. And I know that the whistleblower reports that he's received has been pretty extensive. So he seemed to gloss over that or just not want to go down that path. Sean, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm speaking again not from personal belief, but I'm using the intelligence and the legal lens on this. If he talked about whistleblowers coming forward and saying extraordinary things, then that would almost be confirmatory to be true of whatever they said, without him having the ability, or if they have, to confirm that those things were true. So if I was his attorney or if involved, I would say just stay away from that now until we can actually track everything down. Until it's a yes, then it's a potential. It could be a potential yes, but just to keep it out of the spotlight right now, because that would open up for more damage for credibility down the road. If, let's say, they say, a whistleblower came forward, they said in this hangar is this object, and then they track it down, it's not. It will be forever in UFO books that, they hit it again. So it's either, confirm it is true, or just, I wouldn't talk about it not at this stage. Again, the fact that, at the end there, it's still open. Again, the language that he uses is we need to create the basis of us to be able to even talk about this. So you need to create the language to use the language so that you can, again, I need to write the paper so when we see those signatures in UAP, it's like, that is this. So without doing that, you really, you're getting maybe ahead of yourself for somebody with a scientific background to be running this organization. So I mean, if you want people that kick down doors their whole life, they'll just drive there and kick down the door. They're just going to kick down every door of everything, and that's who they are. But we have a scientist that's in charge of this. They're going to write scientific papers, and they're going to make a scientific process, and they're going to follow it. So it's just, I can't fault him for being the person that he is. I can figure out a way to get them to do what I want them to do, certain ways, but I can't be I can expect it from them versus, it would be very much expected. And again, I was pleased by the process that are set up that, to, I guess, maybe address your individual there was talking about humans being completely dismissed. I would say, I don't think that it sounded like it's not dismissed. They're not closing any of the reports unless they know what that object is, and they're keeping those singular reports alive and they're extrapolating language trends for later analysis. So if you have 30 people that said round object, round object, round object, there's only one singular report, that information is staying alive within their scientific process, because that information, we got 30 reports. we got one orb video that is something. It's like, okay, now we're seeing trends. Now we're doing trend analysis, and that would be aligned with not just, I guess, maybe the science. I'm not a scientist, but that's aligned with the scientific community. That sure as hell is aligned with the intelligence community, and that's exactly what we do.
Right.
So I would say that the process seems that if it continues to exist for long enough, you can get sensor data and imagery data, only one or two, but then 50 human or human reports, and then it's like, okay, that aligns with what they just said, and now you have a larger population. So it quite possibly could be the right way to do this. It's not going to feel good for us because it's not a gourmet meal through a fast food window, but it seems that it's setting it up pretty well.
Right. Yeah. No, I definitely hear you. Just real quick, wanted to say thank you, Chris Wolford from the Super Chat. There were other Super Chats as well. Figu 7716 said, question for Sean. Given that whistleblowers are allegedly saying they aren't feeling protected, that there isn't a hotline or even email to seek help should they be harassed. What amendment to the NDAA would you recommend to tighten any loophole that will ensure whistleblower protection?
I believe that if they're working within the resource, it seems that right now it seems that if they are outside of the DoD community or the intelligence community, that they would have to potentially contact an elected official that's on one of those committees and get fed, either filtered out, as Dr. KirkPatrick was saying, of prioritize the people you're bringing to us, when he qualified his statement of thank you for bringing us, that was kind of a backhanded thank you for bringing us witnesses, but please prioritize them.
Yeah.
That would be the potential way to do that.
Total dick move.
But yeah, you just protect to avoid being, I guess, discovered. You have to protect your own identity at that point.
Right.
So I guess if you're telling everybody you're coming forward, then you're opening yourself up for attack.
Yeah, for sure. So supposedly there are hearings in the works for June on the House side. Of course, we'll have Tim Burchett, who's no wallflower when it comes to this particular thing. Daniel, do you think a House hearing will be any more different than this one? I'm sure they'll call Dr. KirkPatrick. I'm hoping they actually call these whistleblowers forward, because at the end of the day, I think in my personal view, I think this was a bit of a slap in the face to the whistleblowers that have been coming to his office and providing tons of testimony. So Daniel, what do you think? You think it'll be any different in June if that's indeed when these things happen?
It really depends on which committee is doing it. Because as far as I know, while Tim Burchett might be very vocal on the issue, I don't believe he's on any of the pertinent committees that actually do any oversight on this issue. So it kind of just depends on who is holding the hearing, I guess. So it's really hard to tell. They're definitely trying to think of who. I mean, I don't know if it would be the same committee as before. Yeah, it just really depends on who. It's almost hard to theorize. I would say I don't know if they'll bring in KirkPatrick again, because he already came in, and they might feel he's not going to give any new answers. So maybe in this instance they would bring forth whistleblower, witnesses themselves. Maybe they have the public hear their stories.
Right.
Yeah, I think that might be a better use of their time, because I have a feeling KirkPatrick's just going to really give the same answers he was given before. And just to briefly touch upon, I know what your intelligence sources said. I think, and Sean can go more into this too, as he was a former intelligence professional, but I think what we're really getting at here is kind of the different ways in which the scientific community and the intelligence community kind of try to address and resolve issues, right? It's a different mission. It's a different way to go about it. Like the intelligence community is it's about trying to protect this country and keep us safe. And they work in probabilities and just the best available estimate of the situation, right? While the scientific community, they really are all about drafting papers and getting peer review, and like nothing is set in stone until there's such a unanimous consent. So I feel like what we're experiencing now is kind of the tension between those two communities and how they really do go about, they do what they need to do in their environment. And now we have two kind of separate entities trying to kind of go about resolving something, even though they both kind of address it in different ways. Because human intelligence, very important, but I can tell you, from the scientific community, as Sean was saying, patterns are a data set, but human intelligence probably, for better or for worse, in my opinion, just subjectively, is rather lower on the totem pole in terms of, evidentiary things. So it's kind of like it's tough.
I could say that again. I've been out of the intelligence community for quite some time now. However, my experience in it, I wasn't human intelligence. I was an analyst, but my experience with human intelligence people would say that bias against them exists also within the intelligence community. You could come to them with 5 sources and say they're all saying X, and the commander would say, well, I want a picture of X. It's like, well, I don't have a picture of X. I have 5 people without that don't know each other saying X exists. But and it's just probably maybe the human experience. I want to hear it. I want to see it, but it's like, just telling me it exists. Like, I'm not going to thank you for your information, but I need something coupled on top of that. And that bias existed through my deployment and my experience. So, to defend KirkPatrick a little bit is the fact that if it's a single source, it seems that the way that he represented it was that he's not dismissing that case. That case is still open, and then we're going to extrapolate language used in that report to see if we can make usable data later on. So I guess it's not easy being a CI person sometimes, I guess.
So Sean, what do you think about upcoming House hearings? You agree with Daniel? It probably won't be him. Maybe witnesses, even if we don't have Burchett on.
If I guess the people asking the questions are listening, or it goes somewhere, I would ask. Okay, they said that we are, and the 1% that still exists, there are indicators of potential foreign tech. So, okay, what are there indicators that there are not foreign tech? So hit them with the question of, okay, you're closing the cap here. Hey, wait, is the cap still open or is it closed? Like, oh wait, no, there are indicators that this is something. There are some that are still anomalous, because that's, I guess, the root of this effort is, okay, I don't need 100, I don't need 1,000, I need 1. Is there indicators with multiple sensors and multiple reporting that something is doing something somewhere that is just it's not explainable right now?
Right.
So I asked that specifically. Are there indicators that there's something that is not foreign tech doing something anomalous? So.
Yeah. No. Got it. Yeah. Well.
That's a great question.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Absolutely. Excuse me. Well, we had Dr. Gary Nolan on our show a couple of weeks ago, and I think somebody had asked him what he expected of this hearing, and he said it's just going to be a song and dance, and it was, in my view, is definitely quite a bit of that. But nonetheless, I think this hopefully moves the ball forward and generates more interest in getting to the bottom of this. But yeah, well, I want to thank you guys for joining us. Sean, how can folks find you on your social media?
You can find me at SnakePonine on Twitter, or you can hit my email at Sean@thedebrief. Great.
Daniel?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Psychop. It's SICCOP1.
Awesome. Great. Well, guys, thanks for joining us. And folks, if you enjoyed our coverage of this, we always appreciate, as we said, a retweet, subscribe, all that good stuff. And again, we always look for folks on Patreon to buy us a cup of coffee, help us keep the lights on. www.patreon.com/@thegoodtroubleshow. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for your time and your patience. Most folks here don't know this, but we were on way before we went on the air to prep for this. So I really appreciate everyone's help. All right, I'm Matt. It's Good Trouble Show, and we will have more for you soon. Thanks for joining us.